For this lesson, we're going to take a look at comparing decimals and rounding decimals. Both of these should be things that we're slightly familiar with at this point in time, but it's always good to do a slight review. If we were to compare decimals, let's say for instance we have a series of decimals. Let's go with, let's say 1400ths, 14 thousandths, 104 10,000ths, and let's throw one more in there, 2300ths. So let's say I wanted to compare these three decimals. What I need to do is look at them at a place-by-place basis, starting with the decimal. So I look at this, I have a 1, a 0, a 0, and a 2. So I can start doing direct comparison that way. A method that I like to use that usually helps with this is if I line up the decimals of all the numbers and then write the numbers vertically. What this allows me to do now is compare the places directly all in one column. So if I look at the 10th place, I can see I have a 1, a 0, and a 0. I know these two are the same, but the 2 and the 1, they're not. So I know I'm not going to consider the 1 and the 2 right now. The 0 and the 0 though, if I want to arrange these from least to greatest, these are my two lowest ones right now. So I need to move over to the hundredths place to compare. Again, I'm not looking at the first and the last one now because they're larger. So I look here, I have a 1 and a 1. Well, that doesn't tell me anything. I go to the next place, I have a 4 and a 0. The 0 has to be less than the 4. So looking at the hundredths place, I can tell 0 less than 4. So this has to be my lowest number, my least. So that eliminates it. That then leaves me with 14 thousandths as my next number. Well, that takes me back to these last two numbers I have left. I have a 1 and a 2. Well, right away I can tell the 2 in the tenths place is greater than the 1 in the tenths place. So I have 14 hundredths for my next one, 23 hundredths for my greatest number. So I have 104 10 thousandths, 14 thousandths, 14 hundredths, and then 23 hundredths. And so this is a pretty good method of comparing numbers and their decimal places. If I wanted to do some decimal rounding, that's pretty straightforward. Anytime you're rounding decimals, you always have to remember you're looking at the number behind the place that you're rounding. Let's say we were rounding 56 hundredths to the nearest tenth. Well, if I want to round to the nearest tenth, that means I'm rounding this 5 here. That means I have to look at the 6 and determine if I'm going to round the 5 up or down based on the 6. Well, the 6 is greater than or equal to 5 because it's 6, so it's greater. So that tells me I'm going to round the 5 up. So my answer is 6/10. Now let's say I had another number like 643 thousandths. Okay, 643 thousandths. I want to round that number, let's round it to the nearest hundredth. Well, if I want to round to the nearest hundredth, I have to look at my thousandths place to determine if I'm going to round up or down. Well, 3 is less than 5, so it's less than half, so I'm going to round down. If I'm going to round down, I don't actually change the 4 to a 3. My answer ends up being 64 hundredths. The rounding down comes in that the 3 is changed to a 0, and since it's a 0, I don't have to write it here in the thousandths place. So all the numbers after where I round down become zeros. In this case it was just the 3, so I round it down, get 0 there. So that's a little bit about rounding and comparing decimal place values.